Hello, BookTube. Well, the end of the month is on us. Believe it or not, July has vanished, and it's almost August. And that's a time on BookTube when people will do their TBRs for the upcoming month. And as those of you who might have been watching this channel for a bit will know, that's a little problematic for me to do because my TBR for any given month is going to be too long to do a video on. So what I do instead on this channel is not so much a TBR as a TBR BY, a TBR to be read by you, where I simulate the experience of going to a bookstore with you, only without covering you in dog hair. and I'm going to point out 10 books that come out in August that are really worth your time if they're up your alley, if they're the right thing that you're looking for. And I have them here on my trusty iPad, which is maybe not so trusty anymore. I think little Henry is dying. I really do. He doesn't seem to want to take a charge anymore on a consistent basis. I plug him in and then I have to watch over him to make sure that he's gobbling up his electricity. And in the merciless Spartan way that we have with technology, if I have to watch the thing charge, then it's too much bother. And of course, the minute I realized that was true, I looked around and saw how many new iPads there are out and how pretty they all are. I think if little Henry really is giving up the ghost, I think what I would like to do, in addition to getting a new iPad, is to finally finally spend the money to get a Bluetooth keyboard operation that actually works, that's actually really good, instead of getting a $10 one at Kmart and then being confounded when it doesn't work well. I think what I'd like to do, in addition to getting a new iPad, is get a new iPad case with a fold-down keyboard, so that I'm getting a new laptop. I'd be probably about $500, and which is about what a laptop would cost me, the bottom range of them. But this is a laptop that I can pull out of its casing and just carry around. So, and for some mystifying reason, Apple, which is what I'm going to do, that's what I'm going to do after my Lenovo experience. I'm not going to buy anything else. For some reason, Apple has not done the obvious thing that so many other manufacturers have done, which is to have a 360 hinged iPad, where the hinge is both a metal cover and also a Bluetooth keyboard, so that it's not detachable. Anyway, I will look all around. But for now, little Henry did take a charge, so I have these pictures to show you. So we're going to start with a romance novel, a contemporary romance novel, the type that I've always wondered why we're actually calling them romance novels. They are categorized that way, they are marketed that way, but a lot of them, especially now we're in the second generation of them, a lot of them don't read that way anymore. They read like thrillers in which the characters actually have bodily needs, not just for the bedroom, but for the bathroom too, or the kitchen. In most thrillers, the embittered sniper doesn't seem human. He seems like a replicant out of Blade Runner. He doesn't seem to have any human needs at all. I've never found them easy to root for. There's a certain kind of contemporary romance that's they're written as page turners. They're written to be really gripping and really, really interesting, but they're written with human characters. I kind of sort of like that. And the one I have in question is this time around. I'm going to recommend it. It's the first one in a new series by someone who does these things really well. And we're going to see if we can get this to behave here. We'll tap the screen. There we go. This is Perilous Trust by Barbara Freethy. It's the first book in an unplugged FBI series of hers. And this book concerns two people who have almost a sibling relationship. The main character, the female main character, loses her father, who is a high-ranking spook, in mysterious circumstances. It's pretty easy to tell that someone has tried to make it look like an ordinary car accident, and that it's not. And he leaves her a cryptic message: "Trust no one." And no sooner does she get that message than the hero of the book contacts her, and her father was his mentor in the FBI, and they're brought together, and both of them have every reason in the world to distrust each other. and then they're forced to ally with each. I loved it. I thought it was really good. If you're in the mood for this kind of thing, it won't disappoint. And the next one is also fiction. We go back a few centuries. This is The Last Tutor by Philippa Gregory. It's a big fat Tudor historical novel about Lady Jane Grey, who ruled England for just a little while, less than 2 weeks. But it's also about her two sisters. So it's about the Grey girls, and so you get the first third of it is the famous Jane Grey story about how, her father took part in a rebellion. Queen Mary had to have her executed. She died a martyr to the Protestant cause. All that sort of stuff that you may have seen. You may have seen the schmaltzy but very effective movie, My Lady Jane. The first third of the book is that story, and then the middle third is one of Jane's sisters, and then the last part of the book is another one of her sisters, and with their stories as well, navigating Elizabethan diplomacy, Elizabethan court. I loved it. I thought it was really good. In fact, I thought the sections got better as they went along, and because we don't really need another Jane Grey fiction treatment at all. The world could really do without that forever. And it was also kind of sad because in her author afterward, Philippa Gregory, this is the author of The Other Boleyn Girl and a bunch of other Tudor historical novels. In her afterward, she mentions that that she's leaving the Tudor era. She's going to write about other things. I read that and thought the very first time I read that, my first reaction was, well, good for you. You must be sick of it by now. But the more I thought about it, the sadder that made me. She's been consistently really good. I do wholeheartedly recommend the book. And on the 1st of August, in the new issue of Open Letters Monthly, the literary journal where I have the honor to be the managing editor, I have a long review that if you're interested in the subject, you might be interested in the review. Maybe if I remember, I'll come back and leave a link. The next one, we go to contemporary fiction. Don't worry, this isn't all the made-up stories, but I do like fiction, despite the impression this channel might give. This is a debut collection of short stories called Sour Heart by Jenny Zhang. All about the Chinese immigrant experience, all about the bridging the world gap between China and America in the modern day, and also about the immigrants that slip through the cracks, the young kids who come here from alien cultures, aren't welcome here, aren't and don't find a soft landing. And that alone would probably make it interesting for me, but I would feel like it was a little bit on the pandering side. But there was something in the prose of these stories. The predictions like this are notoriously dodgy, but I got the exact same feeling reading these stories that I got when I read Hanya Yanagihara for the first time. I got the exact same feeling of, oh my God, this is a voice that really wants to get stronger, really wants to be heard. So it wouldn't surprise me. These stories are worth it on their own. They're actually really good. But it wouldn't surprise me at all if we reconvene here in 2 or 3 years and we're talking about Jenny Zhang as if she were a name in literature that had always been with us. That wouldn't surprise me at all. In other words, in trite literary jargon, this strikes me as the dawn of a promising career. That's a little glimpse of the reviewer world. And the next one's nonfiction, and it's an occasion. It's not as rare an occasion as I sometimes give it to be on this channel. I love to lord it over the rest of you, but still, Steve does quite often eat crow. I love to do hot takes on books. You know that, because I've done hundreds of videos where that's the only thing I do. I love to do that. But the thing that I hate is when people do that and then live by those hot takes. I dread ever becoming. That's actually the only part of the stereotypical version of old age that I'm terrified is ever going to happen to me. I don't care about the physical weakness. I don't care about the ease with which younger generations can dismiss you without thinking. I don't care about any of that. The main thing I care about is that I will become the kind of person who makes snap judgments and then sticks by them. So when it comes to books, I very much try not to do that. And this is a book that I slagged a little when we saw it. I read it, and it was great. Oh, It's fantastic. It's Why Buddhism is True by Robert Wright. I can't believe I'm saying it, but he does everything right. It is a searching, incredibly intelligent, companionable look at all of the intangible elements of human existence. I just, I of course am not a Buddhist. I am not a theist or a polytheist of any kind, and I also tend to discourage others from being that way because it usually involves such enormous waste of time, and you only get this time. You don't get anything else. But you don't need to be anything to read this book and love it. So if you're of a skeptical mind frame, but also if you're of a spiritual mind frame, even if you're not religious, and even especially if you're dogmatically religious for some religion that isn't Buddhism, I highly recommend it. I can't believe I'm saying that, but I calls them like I see them. And then the next one had everything going against it for me. It's another novel. It has the U.S. edition has just a hideously ugly cover, and the book also has an unbelievably horrible title. I once again stress to the publishing industry. I know that 5 of you are watching. My services are free and available at any time to take the manuscript that you have in house, read it for free, and give you a title that will be really good. The title will be really good. It won't be The Heart's Invisible Furies. But nevertheless, this is by John Boynes, the author of the Boy in the Striped Pajamas, and it's long. It's a long character study of the main character, and also, I mean, the beginning parts of the book are he's given up by his mother and fostered by a wonderful pair of eccentrics, just a man and woman who are indelible characters, especially the woman, but also the man. The woman, his foster mother, his stepmother, has the benefit, the literary benefit of shuffling out of the plot fairly early. That makes it easier. She's a wonderful character, fantastic comedic creation. The stepfather is more complicated and lasts a lot longer and is every bit as memorable. And the milquetoast main character, by any metric that I know of, he should have had me pulling my hair out after 20 pages of him maundering and bumbling and second guessing himself. Instead, I read just enraptured to the end. This is an incredible book. I was so disappointed that it wasn't on the Man Booker long list. But nevertheless, I cannot recommend it highly enough. You're going to love it. It's also, despite the fact that it's about an Irish foundling boy who's adopted by an unloving couple and then faces a merciless world. Despite all that, it's actually very funny. There's a kind of tongue-in-cheek, a kind of take a step back, wry humor that runs throughout it in a way that I have not seen from this author, and that I've barely seen in contemporary fiction. It's so hard to do. It's so hard to maintain that kind of control to do that. I highly recommend it. And then the next one we'll go to nonfiction, because I know you were worried, worried that I was maybe sick or something. The next one is a piece of nonfiction. It's a piece of modern reportage, and I loved it. Absolutely loved it. It's this. It's Losing an Enemy by Preet Parsi. But Trita Parsi is the author's name, and he does. This is a study of the Iran nuclear deal, the controversial Iran nuclear deal that John Kerry hammered out in, I think, 2015. I'm not sure when it was finalized, but one way or another, it doesn't matter when it was finalized because our current president campaigned on a promise to repeal it, to withdraw from it, to tear it up on day one. All about. I mean, the center point is the complicated personal negotiations to get this treaty in place, to get Iran's burgeoning nuclear program under some kind of international control, under some kind of international supervision that actually has tight strictures, as opposed to just condemning it on the part of an outlaw nation who is not being watched or monitored or helped. I thought I read that material and thought, oh, well, okay, you've read books like this and they're never very good, but this is really, really good. Made me really wish that Trita Parsi would just pick some big event in the news from every calendar year and just do the same thing to it. Just write up the same thing. I would so love that. uh, uh, then the next one is it's a tiny thing. It's a little stocking stuffer book. It doesn't make any pretenses towards depth, but it's really really good. It's Morning Star by Anne Hood, who's done she writes about books, and this is a book about books. It's a book about growing up with books, and the different books that have had an influence on her at different periods in her life and how that reflects it. In other words, the kind of thing that if you read these little books about books, you will have read similar examples of it many times. But I don't ever hold that against a book. This is a really good example of the kind. If you have had a lifelong love affair with books, you're going to love this book. The next one, we go back to nonfiction. This is Megafire by Michael Kodas, and it's two-pronged. It's a study of these gigantic runaway forest fires that have become such regular features in American life. The one prong is a study of them, the nature, the ecology, even what they're like on the ground, which was so fascinating. How these things actually behave, how fire actually behaves when it's at this extent. And then the other prong is profiles and descriptions and the drama of the men and women who fight these fires. And I thought that part would be the lesser of the two for me, but I love them both, and they mesh together beautifully. It's a terrifying subject, of course. It's going to change the world as we know it, because it's only going to get worse, to the point where these things aren't mega anymore, to the point where they are normal. They are normal occurrences in the summer, and the summer is slowly going to encroach on the winter, so that these things are going to become very common anywhere there are long stretches of forest and no water. So I highly recommend this to anybody. There are hundreds of you I know who watch my channel who are within range of either sight of these things or the downwind range of these things. So it's for you. But also, if any of you are lucky enough to know firefighters, this is a book to give a firefighter. They will love it. And the next one is it's SFF, and it. I figure you people have Thomas's channel over at SFF 180 if you want, the whole spectrum of the genre, the good, the middling, the bad, the intellectually challenging, all of it. The way I figure it, it's still August. It's still summer. Surely that gives me license to recommend something that's very nearly mindless. And I do. It's The Dinosaur Princess by Victor Milan. It's the next book in his. He has a series of a world, an alternate world in which it's in vaguely medieval society, but dinosaurs are still around and they're used as beasts of burden and animals of war. And I shouldn't like these books the way I do, but I love them so. They are pure cheese. They are pure enjoyment. And autumn isn't here yet in the United States, so we're still within our bounds to like something that's pure enjoyment. So that's my excuse, and I'm sticking with it. I highly recommend this, but only if you've read the ones before it. If you haven't read Dinosaur Knights or Dinosaur Lords, then they'll both be in those taller mass market paperbacks in your bookstore. Go and spend the $10 and buy the first one. And if you're in the mood for it and you don't like it, I'll be amazed. So with this one, the recommendation comes with a caveat: don't pick it up if you're looking to get into the series. And then the last one is an undertaking, but I have to remember that August is also the time of Tome Topple on book 2, where we're supposed to be not afraid of great big books. This is a great big book. This is huge. This is Victor Slezkin's The House of Government, and it's 1,000 pages long, and it's about it's nominally about it's about the triumph of Bolshevism. It's about the Russian Revolution and the ideology that swept across the ruling elite of the country. And the focus is on the so-called House of Government, this big Soviet apartment building that was supposed to be cutting edge in everything. It had its own doctor's office, own dentist's office, own movie theater, child care, all that sort of thing. It's supposed to be a microcosm of how the system is supposed to work perfectly. And the author, in a mind-boggling feat of research, gives every single detail of both those subjects in just exorbitant amounts of texture and color and personality. And he starts off the book with an epigram that's meant to be funny, and it is kind of funny, except that it's at the beginning of a 10-year slog of a book. But the ethos that he summons at the beginning of his comments about the book is that this thing lies somewhere between fiction and nonfiction. So don't think of it really, I wouldn't, if you're intent on trying it, I wouldn't think of it as a nonfiction study of a Soviet apartment block. I wouldn't think about it that way anyway, because I don't want to discourage you from reading it. But rather, I would think of it, I really do. In fact, I've read it twice now. I read the advanced copy, and then because I'm going to review it, I read the finished copy. And the second time through, I was so swept up that I realized I was reading it like a giant Russian novel, like Life and Fate, or War and Peace, or even, you know, the long Solzhenitsyn. Not that there's hardly any short Solzhenitsyn, stuff like that. I started reading it like that, and you know, you don't lose anything if you try to read it that way, because he reconstitutes dialogue and there are emotionally charged scenes. You don't lose anything if you try to read it like it was a giant Russian novel. So, in fact, I kind of wish that he had gone whole hog and made it that way. But one way or another, you know, if you'd have asked Tolstoy at the end of his life whether or not he thought that War and Peace was fiction, he would have said, if that's my choice, then my answer is no. So I'll leave it for that. It's a very ambitious undertaking, but it's well worth it. It's well worth it. And then I want to do one more thing before I go. I know this video is hideously long, so I haven't made a video this long in a while. That's my only excuse. I'm gonna wrap it up in a minute. But there's one other thing. I mentioned it the last time I did a TBR BY, but I can't help but mention it again because it's so good. I want to give it just one more parting shout out, and that's this: the new annotated Frankenstein. This is so good. If you are in a bookstore and you see this lovely cover, it's a big, oversized hardcover, and you're in the mood for the ultimate Frankenstein volume, splurge. You'll be glad you did. You will be reading it and absorbed in it for months, and it will be worth the money, which I hardly ever say about new hardcovers. But anyway, there you go. So that's 10 plus a bonus for an August 2017 TBR BY. And I'll sign off now because I've gone on way too long, but I'll see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.